Hello, everyone. It's Scott, and we're back for Monday's Magic the Gathering Foundation spoilers. But before we do, remember like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Foundation spoiler season. So let's dive into today's new cards. So our first new card is Kaikar, who brings the wind for 2, a white and a blue mana. You can legendary creature that's a bird wizard and is a 3/4 with flying. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you get to choose one. You either exile another target creature you control, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step, or you create a 1/1 white spirit token with flying. So I think either of those abilities are really good on this. So I think this is a very playable card in an Azorius deck. So I think we'll see this, in standard because of those abilities. And those colors really want to cast non-creature spells anyways. Blue obviously has a lot of card draw, so I think you'll be able to activate that ability regularly. And if you build the deck in such a way that the creatures that you are using have entered the battlefield triggers that are favorable, then I think this is a really good card in standard. Next, we've got Sphinx of Forgotten Lore for 2 and 2 blue mana. You get a creature that's a Sphinx. It's a 3/3 with flash and flying. And whenever this creature attacks, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to that card's mana cost. So I really like this card. I think this is an easy include in blue decks because basically every time you attack with Sphinx of the Forgotten Lore, you're going to be able to replay an instant or sorcery card out of your graveyard. And this kind of goes well with Kaikar as well, because you're going to get those, you're going to be wanting to play instants and sorceries anyways, so you can get his activations, and Sphinx of Forgotten Lore just gives you another way to get an additional use out of the spells you've already cast at this point. Next, we've got Exemplar of Light for 2 and 2 white mana. You get an angel with flying. That's a 3/3. And whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. And whenever you put one or more +1/+1 counters on this creature, you draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So very, very exciting card here for angel decks. And we know that we're going to get some angel support in Foundations based on the cards that we've seen already. And we know that Life Gain already has a deck in Standard. So I think this is an easy inclusion in that because you're going to be able to get +1/+1 counters with that deck almost every turn. And that's going to lead to extra card draw. And if you can find a way to put a +1/+1 counter on Exemplar of Light on your opponent's turn, then you're going to get a card there as well. So very powerful card, 4 mana, very reasonable cost for those abilities. Next, we've got Valkyrie's Call for 3 and 2 blue mana. You get an enchantment, and whenever a non-token, non-angel creature you control dies, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. It has flying and is an angel in addition to its other types. So this is one of those cards that either is going to be really good in a creature deck where you're casting this hopefully on turn 5, and then anytime you lose a creature, it's going to return to the battlefield, and at that point you get that +1/+1 counter, you give it flying, and it becomes an angel as well. And I can see this in any kind of deck where we've got a lot of small creatures that we're likely to lose some of those in combat. And because of that, this ability I think works really well with that. Now the question is 5 mana too much for Standard right now? And probably right now it is too much for Standard because a lot of times games are going to be over by turn 5 or 6. And this is not going to be a card that's going to give you a lot of help in those situations. Next, we've got Ashroot Animist for 2 and a red and a green mana. You get a Lizard Druid. That's a 4/4 with trample. And with this creature attacks, another target creature you control gains trample and gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is this creature's power. So really nice ability on Ashroot Animist. Definitely going to be standard playable. Now the lizard deck currently that we have in standard is in red and black. So if we go to add green to that, go to those that color combination, I think then we can find a way to make this work in standard, and this makes it so Fable Passage and things like that make more sense in the deck for lizards. So I think this is going to be a card that we do see played in standard. Next, we've got Lunar Insight for 2 and a blue mana. You get a sorcery, and you draw a card for each different mana value among non-land permanents you control. So this is one of those cards that it could be really good or it could be really bad, depending on the build you're putting it in. So I think for this card to be really successful, it's got to be in a deck where you've got 1 cost creatures, 2 cost creatures, or artifacts or enchantments, 3 cost, 4 cost, 5 cost. So I think because of that, it's going to be an interesting build of a deck that you're going to have to put together to make it work. Because the idea is you're getting at least 3 cards here, maybe 4 cards. On the high end, maybe 5 cards off of Lunar Insight. And if you're getting that many cards, that's an outstanding value. But even if you're getting 2 or 3 for 3 mana, that's probably a reasonable price in standard for that ability. Next, we've got Electro Duplicate for 2 and a red mana. You get a sorcery, and you get to create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it has haste, and at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this token. And it also has flashback for 2 and 2 red mana. So basically you get to play it twice, play it a turn, use its ability, and then again you probably play it the next turn and have that same effect. So I think there's potentially a place for this in standard, particularly if we have a Gruul Stompy style deck. I think this fits nicely into that, where you're getting that ability to copy any of your creatures, get the added bonus of those creatures, and then at the end of the turn you're going to lose it, but in a turn or two you can recast Electro Duplicate to get that creature again. And we do have spells in standard that allow you to copy things. So if we could copy this ability, then I think this is even more valuable in standard. Next, we've got some lower rarity cards for the day that I want to talk about. So the first is Grappling Kraken for 4 and 2 blue mana. You get a Kraken, that's a 5/6 with landfall, and whenever a land you control enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. So very powerful creature here. The problem with it is it's 6 mana, and you're unlikely to play that in standard. Certainly in limited, a very, very good card, but we're not likely to see this outside of maybe some kind of ramp deck in standard. Next, we've got Skyship Buccaneer for 3 and 2 blue mana. You get a human pirate with 4/3 and flying. And when this creature enters the battlefield, if you attack this turn, you get to draw a card. So basically, you're going to attack, play this, draw a card. So you get, for 5 mana, you get a card. You get a 4/3 creature with flying. And, in that evasiveness of the creature is valuable. Again, probably not something that we're going to see a lot of standard play, but maybe it has some fringe playability in the right build in standard. Again, in limited, good card. I'd put it in my deck. So we've got Erudite Wizard for 2 and a blue mana. You get a human wizard. That's a 2/3. And whenever you draw your second card each turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So we've had in the past a lot of creatures like this where your second draw matters, or getting 2 cards drawn on a turn matters. And typically it doesn't really work out very well with these creatures because you can't consistently proc that ability. And because of that, it's a common in limited. If I've got card draw in my deck, I would probably put it in there, but I don't think it's probably going to see much, if any, standard play. Next, we've got Inspiration from Beyond for 2 and a blue mana. You get a sorcery where you mill 3 cards and return an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. And it also has Flashback for 5 and 2 blue mana. So I can see this in a mill deck where we want to get, like a specific cards back, like, Screaming Emergence back, so I can go ahead and take something out of the graveyard. So under those circumstances, I think this is definitely going to be standard playable. The question is, how many copies of it would a deck want? Next, we've got Battlesong Berserker for 3 and a red mana. You get a human berserker. That's a 3/4. And whenever you attack, target creature you control gets +1 and gains menace until end of turn. So nice abilities on this. But I think it's definitely a card I would play in Limited, but it's not quite there in Standard just because red is such a fast color right now. The fact that, you're kind of taking off a turn because it's not going to be able to attack the turn it comes into play kind of gives it that, that makes it not that appealing given what we already have in red. Now, the thing that might make it playable, though, is that a target creature gets that +1 and gains that menace. And that might be in the right build of a mono red deck, might be something that is desirable, and under those circumstances, it could see some fringe play. Next, we've got Billowing Shriekmass for 3 and a black mana. You get a spirit that's a 2/3 with flying. And when this creature enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards. It also has Threshold. This creature gets +2/+1 as long as there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard. And when it enters, you're going to get 3 of those cards there. So, for 4 mana, you get a flying creature that's going to mill you 3, and hopefully in a few turns, if not when it comes into play, you're going to make it a 4/4 with flying. And that's a difficult creature to kill in Standard without direct removal. Next, we've got some lower rarity red cards to talk about. The first is Bulk Up for 1 and a red mana. You get an instant that doubles target creature's power until end of turn. It also has Flashback for 4 and 2 red mana, so we're not likely to play that very much. But the ability to double a target creature's power might be good enough to play in Standard because we have Leyline of Resonance, where you do this and you do it twice for that creature. Now it's a really large creature that can really do some things on the battlefield, especially if that creature has trample. Next, we've got Seismic Rupture for 2 and a red mana. You get a sorcery, and Seismic Rupture deals 2 damage to each creature without flying. So obviously this was designed to be in a deck where you've got a lot of flying creatures. And in that case, it's a really nice card because you can deal damage to your opponent's creatures that are on the ground and protect your creatures in the sky. So in a red deck that's got a lot of dragons or phoenixes or some combination thereof, then I think this is a playable card in your sideboard as a way to deal with board states where we're playing against those aggro decks that we can hopefully on turn 3, we can play this and do a lot of damage to them. Next, we've got Fiery Annihilation for 2 and a red mana. You get an instant, and Fiery Annihilation deals 5 damage to target creature. In exile up to 1 target equipment attached to that creature. If that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. So a really nice ability here that if we're dealing with equipment, which means it's an artifact, that you can hopefully kill the creature and then also exile the artifact so that way it's not playable and attachable to another creature. And because of that, I think this might have some sideboard playability in Standard. Next, we've got Elvish Regrower for 2 and 2 green mana. You get an Elf Druid, that's a 4/3. And when this creature enters the battlefield, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So 4/3 for 4 in green really isn't, really that great a rate because we've got a lot of, 3 mana creatures that are 4/4s, or even in some cases even better than that. We're going to get Gigantosaurus back, which is a 10/10 for 5 green mana. So I think, if it's in the right deck where you're really wanting to pull stuff out of your graveyard and put it back in your hand, because maybe you're in a mill style deck, then I think it might have some standard playability. But outside of that, I really think it's probably more of a limited card. And our last card of the day is Fishing Rod. For 1 mana, you get an artifact that's an equipment, and equipped creature gets 1 and tap Fishing Rod, put a bait counter on Fishing Rod, and whenever equipped creature becomes untapped, remove a bait counter from this creature. If you do, create a 1/1 blue fish creature token, and its equip cost is 2. So this is kind of a nice way of you pay the 1 on maybe your opponent's turn, and you get your bait counter. When you untap at the beginning of your upkeep, then you get to create a 1/1 fish by removing that counter, and then you can kind of repeat that every turn. So 1 mana, you get to create a fish token when you do that. And I think that's very reasonable and a decent rate in standard, and may have in a deck that wants to create creature tokens, some playability. All right, those are the previews for new cards from Monday. We did get some reprints from the set, and I'll do a separate video on reprints at a later time. But thanks for staying to the end of the video, and I will see you in the next one.